What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? I am BDLM, coming to my buddy J4Y, bringing you episode number 65 of our DoD On Man podcast. What is going on, man?
That was what the heck just happened towards the end of that?
Ridiculous. I don't know.
Okay.
It has a mind of its own at this point. What's going on, man?
Not much. I first just want to give a shout out to the Titans. They suck, and I just want to say that thoroughly. Tennessee in general is an okay state, but the Titans lost to one of the only teams that couldn't get a win this season, and it cost me about $140 in my Survivor League. So I just want to say I am not a fan of them at the moment.
I'm glad you got specific because I was thinking you were talking about the figures from Greek mythology.
Well, they also are a pain in my ass. You know, I mean, who wants to deal with a Titan when you get to work? I mean, I don't know when I'm going with that one. But anyways, just want to give a shout out to Titans and how bad they are. I'm doing good, though, personally, having my hot chocolate here. It's getting freaking cold out there, and I hope everyone's bundling up with their Dota gear. I have my Dota hoodie behind me in case it gets even chillier this evening.
I don't know if I've shared on the show how much I love my Dota scarf that I got at the International too. That's the only scarf I've ever loved, and it is just, it's amazing. It's just great.
I hope you put it through the wash once at least by now.
Debatable. It's debatable. It's still got that International 2 feel, Jay. You don't want to wash that away.
I guess there's the memories. They're still in the weeds of it.
The memories are now set in stains on the on the scarf.
Don't go into detail about that. So what are we doing episode tonight about?
Episode 65 happens to be about a little bit about the Dire Tide, a little bit about a nice little update on my 100 games of Venomancer, and it's actually going to be about the third place match for NEST. There were actually a couple of pretty big tournaments over the weekend. We had NEST finish, we had the We Play tournament finish up, and looking across all those games, I thought it would be really interesting to take a look at this best of three between TongFu and Vici Gaming, where we just get to see some really interesting strategies, some interesting item choices for different heroes. So a lot of just neat stuff that I haven't gotten to see a whole lot of personally. But first of all, shame on everybody out there for making Valve feel terrible, so terrible that they're bringing you Dire Tide. I mean, cool, you know, like I get it. If you guys aren't aware, they're bringing Dire Tide in with the next patch. It's belated, obviously, but they basically said, "Oh, we thought we would just pour all of our time into the stuff that people normally complain about, and skip over Dire Tide." And turns out we shouldn't have done that.
See, this just goes to show, folks, that peer pressure does work in any circumstance. So always bully people to get what you want. It's going to work eventually.
Also, if you're one of the people that harassed Volvo, the car company, to try and get Valve to do it, just remember you can use your powers for good. Like, if anybody cared about anything else that much, that they would not only harass the people involved, but anybody that has a vague name reference to it, like, oh my god, what couldn't human beings accomplish? Like, just use your power for good. You could just... I believe.
We should bully hospitals into giving us a cure for cancer or something. Anything. Oh my gosh, it's so crazy. So crazy. But yeah, so, and this is actually something that Scott Balfour, who dropped by again on our YouTube channel, dropped us a nice little comment and happened to talk a little bit about the upcoming patch, which is awesome. It's supposed to be huge. And of course, I know you, Jay, have linked stuff on our Facebook about the image of like Legion Commander as well as Ember Spirit, and then you look at Earth Spirit, who's actually one of the newest heroes to Dota 1, and he actually is pretty far along in the creation process as far as his art's concerned. It's going to be crazy, man. I mean, this whole time I think we've been expecting Legion Commander, but it almost looks like some of these other heroes might just sneak in there and get ahead of her in line. I mean, this has happened in the past with other heroes where they get partially done. You're like, oh, here they come. It's looking good. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, Timbersaw and Skywrath Mage are now in the game. It's like, what happened to that hero that we were looking at like a month ago? But I wouldn't be devastated to see some of these other heroes come in the pool. I'm not gonna lie, especially these two new ones, which it'd be crazy to me if those two actually jumped the gun. Just for the fact that
no one in the Dota 2 scene has pretty much any experience, so they shouldn't. Even the professionals, especially, because they're so focused on these tournaments and everything that how would they even have time to play War 3 to get the experience with those heroes up? So I'd be so excited to see them come in. Obviously, it would be a good amount of time. I can't remember how long it was for Skywrath and Timber to get in captain's mode, but it was probably at least 5-6 months, I think, or something really long before they happened to get in there.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, both of these heroes are really unique. Obviously, we're not going to like go into detail about them because, like you said, they're new and there's not a whole lot to talk about before they're actually in the game. But Oracle and Earth Spirit, they're both really unique heroes. They have really unique kits, and a lot of their abilities seem like really strong. And it's going to be interesting to see how the balance happens around them. I actually know in Dota 1 and some of the recent patches, they've had to tweak some of the numbers because they're feeling a little bit too strong. But yeah, there's just so much to look forward to in this upcoming patch. I know Scott was talking about what kind of balance changes might be coming in, going off like what we were talking about last week about Necrobook. But I don't know if I would want to see anything as far as balance changes yet. You know what I mean? There have just been so many different strategies to come out. There's not been like this one thing. I mean, Midas and Necrobook have been two big items that have really come out of the gates as strong contenders for being like big parts of the metagame moving forward. But as Scott actually brought up, there are these sort of like things you can do around Midas. You can sort of just try and push against it. You can just try to break it. It's this thing that we were talking about last week. It's probably going to wind up being a fad. I think it's a little bit too early maybe to start whacking things with the Nerf bat.
Well, definitely the Hand of Midas. I that's why I think Hand of Midas is because it's so situational, in my opinion. Well, a lot more situational than a Necrobook, for example. Necrobook in any phase of the game is powerful, and that's why I think it definitely will see not big nerfs, but I think it's just only been getting buffed. And just like Treant Protector, it's going to find its day where Ishvar's like, you know what, I've gone too far, and I need to pull back a little bit. And it's going to just go, I think it's going to be steady little subtle nerfs, maybe every patch or so. I'd be really surprised if it was like a massive nerf to the face. So, but we can't let an item be so universally good across the board that everyone just wants it. So that I do think that one will see a turn. But the heroes that are starting to get picked up, I couldn't imagine that they'll be getting massive changes anytime soon, like Pugna or the new Alchemist or anything. I feel like they're just finding their new place in the meta.
Yeah, and I mean, like a lot of them. I mean, there's just been so much different. There's so much variance that clearly I feel like no one's figured out anything. And this sort of goes into what I was sort of saying at the beginning of this, is part of why I wanted to talk about this TongFu versus Vici game for the third place in NEST, was because part of what I saw from both teams that actually wound up playing the dire side of the board was this really interesting way of using Chen +1, the support combination, to move around the map, which I never really seen or paid attention to previously, and I thought it was really interesting to see coming out of that patch and really trying to evaluate, wow, I wonder what kind of changes maybe brought this on, what could have provoked this style of play.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's it's definitely fascinating to see them come in here. Are we going to just kind of break down into these games now, or how do you want to go about it?
Why not? Let's do it. Game number 1. I will say there were some other tournaments. Like I said, the We Play, a great best of 5 between Navi and Alliance. I would recommend going.
How many best of 5s could there possibly be between those two at the end of a tournament? I don't know. That must say something about the teams, I think.
Yeah, and the cool thing too is like when we talked about the last best of 5 between them, and we had the trading of Havost and Loda gear, and it was like it's all like they're clearly just really good, and they sort of, it's not like a bitter rivalry. It's like this rivalry that's just built out of being awesome and having to play each other so many times, so many big tournaments. But anyway,
yes,
that's for another time. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about it eventually.
But this is Southeast Asia. Yes, let's focus.
Yes, we have to get some Asian games in here because we normally do talk about the West quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But TongFu versus Vici Gaming, game number 1. Just gonna go ahead and run through the lineups really fast. TongFu wind up going Alchemist, Rubik, Chen, Lone Druid, and Beastmaster. Vici Gaming wind up going Timbersaw, Dragonite, Gyrocopter, Shadow Demon, and the Crystal Maiden. I believe that last one. So I guess I'll just ask you right off the bat, Jade. Is there anything about this draft that really sort of caught you off guard that you found interesting?
The first thing I noticed, and this is just for the fact that I probably haven't watched a lot of Southeast Asia, but I've noticed a trend in these series in general that Gyrocopter is all over the place, and he was obviously incredibly popular up through TI3, and then the patch. Around the patch, he kind of was starting to falter off, not getting picked as much, but seems like he's kind of back on the scene, and for good reason. He's not really that any worse for the wearer. He's still very powerful. Beastmaster also making his presence known is something that I like to see come back. He's always been a great contender, and obviously one of the best lockdowns in the game with that roar, so it was exciting to see him get picked up again, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about talking about this series is we're not going to go into a ton of detail game per game. There's really just a lot of the trends going across the three that we're going to talk about. And I thought it was really interesting to see in all three of these games, you get to see 2 and 3 core lineups. I mean, for TongFu here, you have the Lone Druid, the Alchemist, and the Beastmaster. On the other side of the board, Timbersaw, Dragonite, Gyrocopter. I mean, there is some potential here for overlap and farm for a lot of these heroes because, especially when you look at Vici Gaming, there's a lot of money-hungry heroes over there. Dragonite might need it the least, but of course, he's this hero that enjoys the BKB, enjoys being able to get some basic items up, and of course, Timbersaw wants that Bloodstone so quickly, and Gyrocopter wants to cleave the world to pieces. It's really just interesting to see that trend across these games, and like you were saying, as far as heroes that you thought were interesting to find in these, the presence of Shadow Demon, this hero who really hasn't been affected a whole lot recently, just being this stable support that shows up in these games across the board.
Yeah, all 3 games he does get picked up, and which is an interesting point. I mean, obviously from multiple factors, he's always been a great hero. Especially, he has the disruption, he has the bonus damage he gives for his team. Really combos up well with a lot of the other players you see on that lineup. So, Shadow Demon into Timber, into Dragonite Stun, into Gyrowald. I mean, there's so many different rude things you can do with that Shadow Demon combination. So, yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense. And as far as bans going, something I noticed across the board that Kunkka was either banned or picked, mostly banned through all 3 games, as well as Ancient Apparition getting banned in 2 of the 3 games. So I know you had a thought on the... Well, why don't you explain to the people why at least Ancient Apparition, and maybe your thoughts on Kunkka as well.
Well, I mean, the Ancient Apparition sort of mentioned it in the patch notes as well when we first saw them. It's like, wow, with this change to Alchemist, that's kind of a hard counter to Alchemist. I mean, now that you're not getting the bonus health and you're just surviving off the regeneration, that's huge if you're able to cancel that. And Ancient Apparition's ults on a really short cooldown, it's, yeah, if you can, shoot from downtown and get off a great Ancient Apparition ult, that's awesome. But really, when you're in the thick of things, you're in a 5v5 fight, it's not all that hard to wind up at least hitting him with the path of the ultimate,
True.
Let alone the explosion. So, another hero to sort of point out that is valuable in all 3 of these games is Viper, who's banned out in this first one, winds up showing up in the next 2. Really makes his presence known, I think, especially in the 3rd game, not so much in the 2nd. But a hero of tremendous value in this series, and it makes a lot of sense because if you just look through the lineup of this game, and keep this in mind as we look through the others, the cores that are being picked up are really durable cores. Lone Druid, Alchemist, Beastmaster, Dragonite, Timbersaw. These are all heroes that have a lot of health. They can take a beating. So the Nether Toxin can actually be pretty brutal. And Viper Strike against melee heroes, kind of nice to have.
Oh, it's so excellent for kiting, and add any real great supports online like Shadow Demon and Crystal Maiden for a good lockdown measure, Rubik as well, and yeah, they're going to have a lot of trouble getting to do their damage in the fights. I wanted to also quickly note about the AA, and this is going to kind of start tying into when we jump into the items about our heroes, but not only against his health regen, but we are starting to see a trend of very quick mechs on these core heroes, and with an early mech means if you can counter out that heal with the AA ult, that's just another great way to disrupt an early team fight. So just wanted to kind of piggyback on the the alcohol tea as well. It just kind of affects all of the heroes that are starting to do this mech trend as well.
Yeah, and to build off that, I mean, that's something that we see in the first two games. The Alchemist mid that winds up going this mech. And I know that's something that even when we've been playing sort of on the side, something that I've been like, we got to see it like, I think twice in all the games we played over the last week. And you building the mech at least the one time, if not both. Getting to see this mech first on a mid hero, and there being some like, what? Why would you do that? Because, you know, I think for the most part, everybody sort of considers it, you know, a support item. It's what you get to try and, you know, deal with some of the damage throughout the game, whatever. It's nice, it's good for pushing, but people don't really consider it much of an item on core heroes.
Yeah, it's definitely not, and it still isn't. I feel like it's really only getting picked up, at least from the patterns I've been seeing on heroes that have the mana to afford it on a regular basis. Alchemist, the only reason he is mana hungry with the way they build him, but he at least has that good mana regen from his ultimate, as well as generally going like a bottle or something along the way. So he can still afford it. Viper, obviously not very mana hungry at all. You'd love to use that Q a lot in the ulti, but it's still, if you just get some kind of like a Basilius or some kind of mana regen, you generally won't have an issue, and you can pop that mech up as well. So, but you know, you won't see like a Dragon Knight generally get it. You won't see these other heroes, Timbersaw, etc., that even though they could get it, they'd rather get these other items that are just much more important for them to do well in the team fights.
I will say that I have seen more mechs coming out of Timbersaws.
Is that right?
I have, yes. There have been several, and it's interesting. And I sort of wanted to just sort of compare maybe the pub perception of mech versus what we're seeing in the competitive scene, because really when you see the effect of what it has in some of these really early engagements where you're able to be that mid hero, to be able to get that quick team fight item up, what it's able to do for you throughout the fight. In these series, Alchemist is one that picks it up, and also Viper. And it might be an easier case to make in the Viper because this is a hero that gets plenty of damage just through his kit. He doesn't necessarily need big damage items. He really just needs to survive. And when you consider that not only do you get the heal, but the item itself gives you 5 armor, and then when you pop it, you also get an additional 2 armor, which is actually pretty substantial in the early parts of the game.
Oh yeah, it's huge, and for a hero like Timbersaw who has like no base armor, really, he has to build it up from being attacked. Yeah, that can be a nice way to kind of do well early in the fight. I mean, I definitely understand. He's very mobile, and a mobile hero is one you want to generally get this on, or someone that can stick with the pack at least. And Timber has no issue with that, and also be able to hopefully survive long enough to get the use out of it without just blowing up instantly from some kind of CC. But yeah, I've enjoyed it, and, like you said, and I mean, I'm not going to get into too much, but I got to play that Viper mid, and Viper is like the new OD in my opinion. Like, he just slaughters one-on-one. It's so brutal, so amazing with that poison attack at level 1. You can just rank it up with no cooldown. It's so freaking effective with the Nether Toxin on top of it. But you know, I was able to just snowball ahead, and once I built that mech, we were able to just push every single lane, and there was nothing they could do. They would try to focus me, and I would just mech up and be tanky with my armor, and by that time, if they even did kill me, the rest of my team would slaughter them. And if they didn't focus me and they got low on health, Nether Toxin kicks in. And that's why on these heroes like Alchemist, like Viper, they have so much innate damage from their kit that they don't really even need items right away. They can afford to go this mech and still be powerful in the fight.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of skipping around a little bit, but when you look at what happens in Game 3, it's actually TongFu, and they wind up picking up Viper and Alchemist. And Alchemist just sort of builds almost straight tank. He winds up getting himself a BKB, an S, and a Y, which is really interesting. We're going to talk about that some more. Vanguard and Assault Curious. Winds up just being tanky. And sort of just to say again that throughout these games, you get to see these core heroes that are actually really naturally durable, and they really just have to survive long enough for their innate abilities to kick in, like you were saying. I mean, there's a Weaver on the other side of the board who isn't able to put together too many damage items, a Dragonite as well who isn't able to get any straight-up right-click damage, but these heroes pretty much just soaked up enough damage that Nether Toxin would start to kick in, that Leshrac, who was actually able to get himself some decent stats up, a Mirana who was able to build herself a Desolator for TongFu, were just able to pump out enough damage over time to really be able to take down the enemy team just by sustaining themselves.
Yeah, that's definitely a very, very strong point there. But we should try not to jump around too much. Let's just kind of go in order as much as we can, and then we'll just kind of, even though we've kind of messed that up already, let's just try our best to stay the course here. So game one, and this is obviously Spoil City. So if you wanted to watch this matchup, then pause now, and then you'll find out later what's going on. But yeah, it's going to be. And all of these are pretty convincing games. I'm not sure if you said that yet, but it's kind of one-sided. So the excitement factor, it's there in some fights for sure. In fact, I don't remember which one of the games it is, but it's like people just kept teleporting in and getting killed over and over. And it was just like, oh my god, this is brutal. But yeah, it's more about the builds, like you were saying. The game one here, the Beastmaster versus the Timber. I just wanted to make a quick note. He ended up going, and you normally see the wild axes get maxed out to both clear the wave and obviously harass with, but he actually went 2 wild axe, 3 call the wild. He rushed for that 3rd point to get the greater hawk, so to get more scouting vision. I just thought that was interesting, just because it's very different than when normal, especially in Southeast Asia. We've seen so many builds called Beastmaster. We've seen, the Inner Beast or whatever, the attack speed aura. We've seen that in stats maybe to get a little more but that's usually a middle build and not a side lane build. But I don't know. What do you think that was an intelligent idea in that off lane?
I mean, I feel like Beastmaster was just so screwed in that lane to begin with. Like, the poor guy. I mean, he didn't stack any of the ancients, I don't think, much at all. That game really just tried to one-on-one Timber, and it didn't work so well. I guess if you're playing Beastmaster in that regard, you're pretty much just assume you're not going to get a whole lot, and you really are just looking for the utility. And of course, after he hits 6, gets Roar, they're able to actually kill the Timbersaw using the Chen and the Rubik. But I guess picking up that Greater Hawk helps get you some mid-control. Obviously, Alchemist was a big part of their lineup, and a hero that you see across the board in these games is really, I think, the core of what's going on. He's really up there in the middle of the fights, and it's about his success that sort of helps set the pace for the game. So, I guess in that respect, if you're able to have this Lone Druid, you're able to have this Alchemist. Not too long ago, those were 2 of the biggest carries you could get. You don't necessarily have to try and go for anything too crazy as far as your own damage and attack. And, I guess they have the Chen. They do have the Lone Druid Bear. They could have put themselves together a decent push if they really wanted to, but they really just had a hard time from the get-go. And, the thing that I thought was really interesting about what TongFu did in this game was taking the Chen and the Rubik. They start top with Lone Druid, and they sit there for a couple levels, and they actually sort of run a defensive tri-lane around Lone Druid. There wasn't a whole lot of presence directly in the lane from the Chen, but they do make their presence known, and they are able to get Lone Druid a couple levels up. So he's like, okay, well, now we'll leave you alone. And then they wind up going bottom, and they help use the Beastmaster Roar to get that first kill on Timbersaw, who had already gotten a kill on the Beastmaster. And this is something that I really haven't seen a whole lot. I feel like when we make the Chen Enchantress comparison quite a bit because it's an easy one to make.
Yes.
But Enchantress is, for me, that big ganker, and yeah, you can look to just sit in the jungle and farm on Enchantress, and you can look to gank with the Chen, but I feel like the standard for both these heroes is almost Chen seems to be this hero that's about getting up the levels, getting up the farm in the jungle, might gank once in the early part of the game, but really wants to try and get his mech up, get maybe the arcane boots, get Nogginims if he can, and then look to really try and participate more once the laning stage starts to break down, whereas Enchantress more the ganker. Here it's really like Chen is really trying to move around, he's trying to have a big effect on the game, and then winds up putting nothing together.
Well, that's just it. I mean, I completely agree with your statement there, and it's not that Chen can't, because obviously he can apply great pressure in the lane. He can gank well depending on the neutrals he does control, but Enchantress, you look at her kit, and her control is also a slow in effect, whereas his is just straight up damage. So if you put Enchantress in the place of Chen there for that tri-lane, now they have a telekinesis plus a slow instead of just damage and then lone druid. That tri-lane was kind of doomed from the start. It was not going to be able to go up against it just for the fact that it was lone druid in it. He's not a tri-lane hero. He's so great on his own that he doesn't need the support. That's kind of his whole concept, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't know that like the plan was to be this defensive tri-lane and then they like had to break it. I almost feel like the plan from the get-go was to sort of have this mobility between these heroes. I mean, Chen and Rubik even spend some time together just in the jungle, looking to get experience for the both of them. But they really they get Lone Druid a couple levels and then they leave him, and then it's good luck. Unfortunately, Lone Druid isn't able to do a whole lot this game, unfortunately. But I just thought it was neat that it was a much more mobile Chen than I at least had envisioned in my head. And this is something that we see in Game 2 as well, because it's almost the same setup. Chen +1 looking to get around and apply some early pressure.
It just doesn't feel the same as when Puppey does it. I can't describe it any other way. Puppey seems to have a magical way about it, but there were so many smokes purchased in that early game by the teams with the Chens and getting, like you said, tons of mobility. It just ended up really hurting them in the end when Chen was underleveled, underfarmed, and they weren't even able to capitalize on these roams. They weren't able to pick up the kills they needed to make it worth it. And that's at that point, they were behind. They couldn't really push with the Chen at that point because he was so underleveled, and it just really kind of backfired. Chen, in fact, going 0-2 in this whole series. So, yeah, it definitely was not his best day and his best usefulness that we've seen coming out of other games.
I think last big thing that I wanted to mention about this game was just how Lone Druid winds up getting built and played, which, Lone Druid wasn't really a hero that saw much happen to him in 6.79. I'm struggling to remember much of anything of note. But it was really neat to see, the movement speed. It was the movement speed increase to go to 315. Apologies. Gets that buff. And then getting to see him pick up the Tranquil Boots in this game I thought was really interesting, because basic boots on the Bear, Tranq Boots on Lone Druid with his speed increase, when Lone Druid is not in true form, he's actually just as fast as the Bear, which is sort of uncharacteristic. I don't know if anybody out there has played a lot of Lone Druid games, but you get outrun by your Bear constantly. Then the really disappointing moments are when your Bear gets right into range to swipe somebody and then you're not fast enough to complete the attack, and so he just sits there and
he just head fakes. Yeah.
You wanted me to a swipe? Okay, I can do that. Get over here. So it was really neat to see this Lone Druid who doesn't even drop into the true form really much at all until the double-digit levels. He really just uses the mobility as a way to keep himself alive, and is able to just sort of stay in his regular form. I mean, unfortunately, he's not able to do a whole lot this game. He doesn't put much together. He's not able to be a huge force in the game, but it was such a neat way to see the hero played because of some of these changes. And, I mean, there was at least a handful of times in this game where he just straight outruns people to safety.
Exactly. It's right, like you said. Now that this has definitely been, and this is just such a great example of how it just shows that it's not only for that roaming class. It's very niche still, but it doesn't have to be just for Earthshakers, for Crystal Mains, for certain heroes. It can still be for other ones in certain situations. And Lone Druid is a prime example of that. The fact that generally how he's built is that the Bear is going to get everything. So your hero just needs to be tanky. He needs to get aura items per chance, but either way, he doesn't need to get himself any kind of damage or attack speed or anything like that. So yeah, the Tranq Boots fit in perfectly, even when they're broken. They still give a ton of speed, and they still give you that armor, so you're still going to be just as effective if you attack or if you don't attack, really. So, yeah, I really like it as well. The Hand of Midas, I like it, and it's kind of bringing me back to the old days when you always saw Hand of Midas on the Bear, and just to get that early lead into a bigger lead, but it just ended up obviously not working out. They got kind of pushed way too early, too fast by the other team, but it once again, it's kind of bringing me those nostalgia moments where you're seeing a build and you're like, oh my god, I remember that. I remember those days. Those are Those were good days. Maybe not now anymore, but those were good days.
Yeah, I mean the other cool thing about the way that the Lone Druid functioned in this game was because he was in that top lane for the Dire, he had access to the yellow camp, and he was able to just walk over and farm it. He sort of got to play this like dual role between the jungle and the lane. Obviously, because the easy camp it's pretty easy. It's not that much of a challenge. He wasn't wasting much health on his bear. Wasn't putting it into harm's way all that much by having it tank up those creeps. It was really just a great place for him to duck out of the lane and try and get some extra gold and some extra experience. And sort of going back to how we talked about how like the off lane got this extra help. It's interesting that we see the safe lane become the sort of off lane now. Like it's just seems much more advantageous across all of these games again to sort of run your solo in that safe lane role if you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, Beast. It winds up being Beastmaster and Timber, obviously in the solos. You wind up seeing largely a solo scenario in the top lane for Lone Druid as well, but I think it's just really neat to see how that interaction works now between the easy camp and the lane.
I mean, Beastmaster versus Timber is like... It's like... God, I'm having a horrible time having a simile here. But it's just not fair. There's no way in hell Beastmaster will ever win that one-on-one, just for the fact that no matter how he skill builds, if he skill builds the attack speed aura, you're hitting him more, you're giving him more health regen and armor. If you go with the boar's going to attack him, giving him more health and health regen. If the Axes is probably your best bet, but even still, he'll just probably get some kind of health regen, and then you can't win the lane, and he's going to easily outburst you. So it's just, from the start, he was doomed, like we said, and we didn't expect him to win by any means, but it just allowed him to completely get out of control, and the fact that he got kills, too, on top of it, just did not help anything.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if this is a LAN event, and I see that's going to wind up being, me on a Beastmaster against the Timbersaw, I just, lean forward, look down the table, and just go, Reels, seriously? This is what I have to do?
Who gave me this?
This is a thing. This is going to happen. Okay. Well, I mean, it's just such an unfortunate situation. Yeah, like we said, it doesn't really work out, but... We say we get into the second game, my friend.
Yeah, I guess we can do that. Game 2.
I mean... Might as well.
Vici did win that, by the way, so they're up 1-0 at this point. Getting into game 2, still Vici versus TongFu, believe it or not. I don't know why I said that, but they're still playing strong. The picks Vici Gaming went with Shadow Demon, Kunkka, Chen, Viper, and Nature's Prophet. TongFu going the Alchemist this time. Rubik, Weaver, Lashrak, and Nyx Assassin. So kind of a couple swaps off the bat. Chen now on Vici Gaming, Alchemist now on TongFu. And then a couple new players with the Kunkka, the Nature Prophet, the Nyx, Weaver, Lesh. Actually, a lot of new heroes getting used in this draft, and that has a lot to do with the bans being a bit different, with the Timbersaw getting banned out this game, unlike last game. Yeah, so, I mean, I don't even know where you want to start with this, but feel free to jump in.
I will say that Alchemist gets picked up really early again.
Yep, first pick,
so,
I believe it is.
Yes, clearly important hero. And then, of course, you see the Shadow Demon Kunkka come right out, and you pretty much got your guarantee that that's going to be your middle lane. You wind up seeing Viper go into a solo scenario. The Chen also on the Dire side of the board, again, in a situation where he, throughout the game, really isn't able to put anything together. And just winds up trying to move around and make whatever happen. Not to much success.
I just actually want to throw in general, Alchemist first pick all 3 games. So there's just your example, and this is where it's interesting that we get to now, we're tuning into these Southeast Asian games, because it's just, in the Western scene kind of always seems to lag behind Southeast Asia, in my opinion, a little bit. They kind of conform to their own things, and I really love to see this Alchemist just getting used kind of a different way. I mean, yeah, he ends up being the same hero we all know that he's going to be, with that hard carry damage and the slap chop, as you lovingly refer to him as, but the early game is just so different than what, Western scene. Western scene, we're using Grievel's Greed, we're used to seeing him safe lane, just farming away, getting his items, and this one's I'm going to go mech, go acid spray and concoction, and just mech it up and destroy the other team. And it's really fun and interesting to see a whole different way or a different perspective on a hero. But the Shadow Demon Kunkka getting as a reaction pick to Alchemist, I feel like that was just a pocket strat they just wanted to pull out for this game. Now, granted, Kunkka was banned in the first game, so now that he's available, maybe they're like, this is our time to shine with him, but it really didn't work out the way they wanted it to.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, goes back again to the first thing they mentioned off the bat, and just that I don't want to see the nerf bat come out, because you're still seeing so many different strategies come out. You see a 1-2-1. I don't know the last time I've seen a 1-2-1 with someone in the jungle. Like, that lane setup is just awesome to see. Unfortunately, it doesn't work super effective. Viper has a hard time. As I said, Chen isn't able to really jungle as well as he would like. But it's just, again, just another way to try and deal with the changes. And it's just fun to watch these different strategies come into play. So it's not just trialing.
Exactly, and like I said, leave it up to Southeast Asian scene to really put it out there for these different strategies. I'm not saying the Western's not creative, but I'm just saying that you generally will see this more action-packed, more, well, actually that's kind of ironic to say. Not always action-packed, but at least these strategies coming out here. And, you know, another interesting matchup that was that Nyx versus Nature's Prophet. You know, I was telling you when I was watching it that I just didn't see how, once again, that could favor the Nyx at all for this team. It just seems like Nature's Prophet should just have his way with him due to the fact that he can just harass safely. You know, you don't have to worry about the carapace really affecting you at all. Just push the lane safely, and, you know, I mean, you have to deal with the Impale, but the mana burn won't even be that devastating. It really was a nice, safe lane for him to get farm in, so at least they had one nice lane there, but the rest of it wasn't necessarily going so well, like you said. The Viper had a lot of struggling early on.
Yeah, I mean, and even when you, like, especially really early into the game, I mean, Nature's Prophet has to teleport out almost right off the bat to try and help the Viper who is getting dove, and it just leaves XTT to get some levels up, get a nice little level advantage in that off lane as the Nyx assassin. So, I mean, it even really wasn't, like, too bad for him to start right off the bat. So, I think that the game, like, worked really well for TongFu. They were able to have the Weaver and the Leshrac and Shadow Demon combination, or the Leshrac and the Rubik combination, pardon me, which is, of course, just vicious and is really nice. Again, though, Viper able to take advantage of that yellow camp. I mean, that is the one place where he's able to actually get farm against this super aggressive tri-lane. He winds up pulling it, but he winds up ducking into there and really helps him get any sort of semblance of item in this game.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, you know, unfortunately when he's matched up against a hero like Weaver, he's essentially not going to do much of anything. Just the fact that if he ever tries to ulti him, well, I'm going to go back in time, and that's not going to even be affecting me anymore. So he'll do harass every now and then, but Shishuki also takes quick work of that. So it was really a strong matchup for TongFu in that regard. And like you said, Rubik and Leshrac, I love Leshrac coming back in the scene. I feel like he was unjustifiably taken out, in my opinion, by pro players. I was actually a little upset that they stopped using him. It's not like he's been really any weaker. You know, he's got the amazing stun. It's kind of like Lina in the sense that, you know, you kind of want to set it up with someone else at least early in the game. But it still has the amazing physical and magic components. The physical for pushing towers, one of the few heroes that can really do it well from an early standpoint. The AoE coming out of this guy is phenomenal. And when you compare it up with other heroes like a Rubik, like a Shadow Demon, even like an Alchemist with the Unstable Concoction, I mean, there's so many different ways they can set up some nice stuns in these couple games they play that I'm just, like, I really am a fan of seeing him back in here.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another great thing to point out, too, just even for the Nyx. When you start to look up at the lineup, you have the Rubik as well as the Alchemist. So like you said, they can help sort of put these heroes in place to start with to help line things up, because obviously now, since the changes in Pale isn't targeted, so you have to aim it slightly, and unfortunately you do even see in the pro level, you know, some really unfortunate misses on the Impale. So it's really nice to have those couple set stuns in place, really helps set up the more difficult ones to land, and yeah, they do a good job taking advantage of it in the game.
Yeah, and I made a little note here saying new meta equals carry gets mech. And that seems to be kind of the, at least in Southeast Asia, it seems to be kind of a thing that's going on, because in this game, I believe Viper was also, he was trying to build one up for his team as well, since Kunkka was in the middle going the phase boot drum combo. But in general, we're seeing these normally hard carries going that mech first, and it's proving to be very deadly. But it once again, it has everything to do with the pace of the meta. And the current pace, at least in Southeast Asia, is early aggression into tower dominance. And so therefore, you do need that mech as quickly as possible. It almost brings me back to days of the Windrunner mid into that mech, just going that so quick. And that was like way back, probably in TI1, in between TI1 and TI2 times. But that kind of faltered off a bit. But now, once again, coming right back in us, except this time with someone that can farm really well and have strong lane presence, both Viper and Alchemist. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is like a great case to sort of compare and what we were talking about earlier of it just being like considered, a support can get this whenever, and when they get it, it's going to be great, versus, the Alchemist who actively tries to get it as his first item when you consider Alchemist this hero that's supposed to be a hard farmer and wants big items so he can do all the damage. Moo puts it together, I believe the 16-minute mark. I'm going to test my memory here. Viper, I think the first time he even pops the mech, it's like 20-something. Might be around the 20-minute mark. So you just see how big of a difference that is when you consider that these games last like 30 minutes, under 30 minutes for the first game. This one goes for 33 minutes. So 4 minutes in a 33-minute long game, that's a pretty huge amount of time. And so I think that's really where you get to see how prioritizing that mech on these core heroes really pays off for you, as opposed to just like, well, when we get it, and it'll be nice then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a valid point there. So anyways, the moral story is Game 2 won by TongFu. Alchemist now 2-0, Chen 0-2 at this point. As well, I'm not going to give you records for everyone, so screw you. But those are the ones I want to point out for the most part. And then we can get in Game 3 finally. So it's 1-1 at this point, going for this third place here. And I'll let you go over this really quick.
Oh, Lord.
Or
that was a
I'll
terrible
do it.
idea.
I'll do it.
It's a bad idea, Jay.
I'll do it. I was going to give you the satisfaction, but you know what? Seems like one of us is a little more prepared than the other. TongFu, going with the picks here. They went with, you guessed it, Alchemist first, then the Shadow Demon, Leshrac, Mirana, and Viper. Vici going the Elder Titan, Dragon Knight, Weaver, Earthshaker, and Windrunner. So, there's a lot of things to say already about this draft. A lot of things to say. The first ones I want to say are, it seems like TongFu got every single hero they wanted in this draft, more or less. I'm not 100% about Mirana, although I feel like when we're going to talk about it, maybe that is exactly what they wanted. But as far as Alchemist, Viper, Shadow Demon, and Lesh, it's like everything that's worked for them up to this point, they got in their lineup already.
Yeah, I mean, like we've been saying, some of these heroes that have been prevalent in all the games, even when you go down to the supports and the Shadow Demon, they're able to get it all. They really want for nothing in this game. And like you said, when they wind up getting the Mirana, you just look at, Shadow Demon, Leshrac, Mirana. And, like you said, it might be something they just realize, like, this is potentially a great opportunity. But when you look at the synergy that really the Shadow Demon and Mirana were able to put together in these games, it looked like they've been practicing it all week. There were just some glorious disruptions into the magic arrow. Like, it was just awesome, perfectly timed, and just really what they were able to put together with that was awesome. And also, I guess you can throw in the fact that they were able to level 1 Roche with this lineup. What
Also impressive.
I don't know about you, but that was not on my mind at all when I saw those 5 heroes together. I wasn't thinking, one Roche team.
Easy. Well, obviously, Vici Gaming didn't have it on their mind either. But, the thing is, with that arrow, is just one of the best Roshan abilities in the game. Well, ways to, obviously, help your team. Just the fact you get that easy max stun if you can just pop his magic immunity, or his block, excuse me. Get that really long both damage and stun component, and allow you a lot of free time to beat on him. So, by the way, use that in your pubs if you haven't been. But, I I really was intrigued by that as well. But I just all around, like you said, that tri-lane was just so brutal. We've actually in pubs been playing against Shadow Demon Mirana lanes. I feel like I've seen a ton of them recently, just as a duo lane. You throw Lesh in that mix, it's just not fair. It's kind of broken, stupid broken at that point. Because as I was saying previously, the Shrek loves to get set up into something, and Shadow Demon's one of the perfect heroes to do it. If you can time that disruption, which hopefully at a professional level you can, then you'll be able to land a Split Earth, an arrow, whatever CCs you need, and you're going to easily wipe out whoever you did it on. So, yeah, a really devastating combination. And then when we go over to Vici Gaming, I mean, they got Elder Titan, who's been banned, first banned in the previous 2 games, and actually got through the draft and was able to get picked up here along with the other heroes. But the Earthshaker, Windrunner, Weaver tri-lane that was going against them. Yeah, so we were racking our brains here, and the only thing I could come up with the Earthshaker was that he was going to Echo Slam the Shadow Demon illusions after disruption.
I'm sorry. I've said this before. I like Earthshaker in theory, but I always like cringe when I see him because it's either going to be something gimmicky or that team's going to lose. Like, that's
Fact.
Probably not backed up by science
No,
or
not really.
statistics. But I don't know. I'm never really that excited to see Shaker because, I don't know.
Well, they're going for the full Fissure team, essentially. I mean, they got the Elder Titan. They needed to add his brother, Earthshaker, on there. I mean, it also, if you can block them in an area and allow Titan, DK, and Weaver to kind of just right-click people down, it's going to be kind of brutal, but there just weren't nearly any opportunities for them to really see that come out as much as you'd want it to. I mean, there was one point where I thought a fight was strongly going to go for Vici Gaming. They seemed to have caught out the enemy. They had the Elder Titan dropping his ultimate. I'm like, oh, here we go. They're going to do some work with this combination. And then Viper had a mech already at that point. Popped it, and I was like, oh, the battle just reset, and they don't have ultimates now. This is not good. And sure enough, they just cleaned up on Vici Gaming. So, I don't know. I feel like they were just so heavily invested. Yeah, and the Earthshaker, I kind of have to agree with you. It's not always gimmicky, but it really feels like he's niche. It's not as, you really need something to go with it in order to make him useful. And the Alt Echo Slam was really never a factor in these fights. The Fissure here and there helpful, but besides that, he's pretty worthless.
Yeah, I mean, Shaker's weird because he's always like behind in levels in the games he's in. And it almost makes me want to say, like, man, there's a hero I would just like to see the Midas on, just to see if he gets his levels up, like, what can he do? But really, I mean, he's pretty much the same hero all the time. Like, the levels, of course, are going to help you, but by how much? It's really the Enchant Totem that, like, scales up the craziest. Yep. And that's not that's not why you pick the Shaker, obviously, unless you're Dendy and you build Daedalus.
And Shadow
Blade. Yeah, except for those situations, So I have a very weird relationship with the Shaker. Like I was saying, I'd love to see him work. Like I said, I like him, but I'm never really impressed when I see him on the board, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just feel like they had other options a lot of other options that really could have scaled well with this team. Get yourself a Vengeful Spirit, get someone with a nice. I mean, obviously they want a reliable CC, but you had other reliable CCs definitely available. And a melee one on top of that just wasn't necessary when you already had the Titan DK. The Windrunner played very well, and I can't remember the player that did it, but she got some really good shackle shots throughout the fight that I was really impressed with. But it just didn't seem like enough, and that was once again the issue. They had burst damage, but for some reason they weren't able to chew through the likes of the mech and the pure tankiness. Kind of what we said before with the Alchemist and the Viper, they were just so beefy that they were just hard to take down in the first place, and that kind of showed through here.
I gotta say, the thing that I will absolutely give Vici Gaming the kudos for is that they walked into that aggressive tri-lane at a level disadvantage, and they didn't give up as many kills as I think you might expect when you look at their tri-lane, right? Like, they have the pub stompiest tri-lane of all time on TongFu. That is just painful. And Vici Gaming, they just play defensive. They try to make the most out of it. And really, I guess maybe also to TongFu's credit is, some of their early success actually comes out of realizing that tri-lane isn't working, and they send Sansheng top to go get kills with Viper against the Elder Titan. So I think really dynamic play out of both teams in that bottom lane, like really able to realize, to take advantage of, hold on, I got the words, to not fall into the trap that TongFu had set up with their heroes and with that early Roshan, but then for TongFu to, when they realized that trap wasn't working, to capitalize somewhere else on the map.
Yeah, that's very well put. I appreciate
the third
that.
time. The third
time's the
well
charm.
put.
That's always been the saying. But yeah, that definitely, like you said, pub stompy, but legit. And it seemed quirky at first, but it just continued to do damage. Even late game, when they didn't even need to do all the setups that they had, even though they successfully did, the heroes just got so strong at that point, and they got built up their advantage so well that they were able to capitalize on it. And Shadow Demons just scale so well throughout the entire game. That's just why I love that hero in general. Well, 3 of his 4 are pretty damn good throughout the game. The Shadow Poison will start ticking off later and whatnot, but the rest of it's so disruption in the getting the boosted damage as well. Very effective. The Vanguard Alchemist, you kind of mentioned it earlier in the cast, but finally we get to see that item back in action, and now that Alchemist didn't have to build a mech finally, he was relieved that he got to get some items of his own. And I think you mentioned earlier, but he went the Vanguard, the S and Y, the BKB, Assault Carriers. I mean, he was just back to his normal old self and just slap chopping the crap out of everything, and doing it very well.
Well, I mean, I think Mu got to sort of not build the team-oriented teams, except for, I guess, the Assault Curious. But the thing I liked about seeing his build this game was that it was still, like, new to me. Because going the Vanguard, and then S and Y, which is this item that I've been really kind of curious with on the Alchemist, especially, because Yasha is sort of the go-to agility carry item to increase your farm. Just because you get to move around a lot, it gives you good armor, it gives you the damage, the attack speed. It's just all around a great item. And Alchemist is this hero that, of course, likes to be able to farm, but now also wants some health. So, hey, what if we get the best of both worlds? We get this S and Y, this item that's going to help us move around the map more. It's going to make us tankier, and also help us stay on top of targets because of the potential slow out of the Sage. I think a really intelligent choice, and one that I hope to see more, because this, I think, really, this build takes advantage of Alchemist's new chemical rage, and this lineup too. Like I said earlier, it's this sort of tri-core setup. Alchemist doesn't have to do all the damage. Viper doesn't have to do all the damage. Mirana doesn't have to do all the damage. All 3 of them were really able to just contribute a decent amount, and that added up contributed to just destroying Vici Gaming.
With the Shadow Demon buffing the damage on top of it, and speaking of buffing damage, he won a medallion in this game, even furthering that. And I kind of also know about how Midas Armor wins games. It really does in a lot of circumstances. They had the Acid Spray plus medallion combo. These people's armor did not stand a chance. You saw just like a 3-shot here and there. It just was brutal, and a great way to really take down those heroes, especially heroes like the Dragon Knight, who has a lot, or Weaver, who maybe has a lot of agility. It's a great way to burn through their armor and be able to take them out just like they weren't wearing anything at all. So I really was a fan of that item pickup from the Shadow Demon. And just in general, this TongFu lineup, I mean, the reason I loved it was just, it was like a composite build. Like, they had great physical, but they also had great magic. It was such a perfect mix between the two that it was so hard. Dragon Knight could have built BKB, and I believe he did, but still it wasn't enough to help him against the rest of the damage output. And there wasn't like a way to counter their lineup. It really just was all around strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of what was interesting about the way that these 2 lineups go against each other, is that Vici, they sort of feel like obligated to build these defensive items. I mean, they get BKBs, they aren't able to get damage items, and so that again just goes into how Alchemist didn't have to go like MKB or didn't have to go Mjolnir, didn't have to go these super high damage items, because they're going defensive. So if he can just sort of do slightly more damage to them and be tankier than they are,
they're not going to be able to do anything. And they didn't have any sort of counters. Like you said, the Ancient Apparition is not able to make it into this game. So, what's Alchemist got to worry about? He just sort of stacks up the health, gets some more regeneration, blocks some of the physical damage with the Vanguard, and he just goes about his merry way, slap chopping left, right, and center.
Do you think Alchemists, since the build, should at least have one item that focuses on health and strength in general going forward?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's again I think why I like the S and Y so much, because it's like it feels like the old school Alchemist of I want a farm item, but it's like, hey, I also can't go Midas Radiance. Like, no, never again, ever. Don't, no. Because you just can't support it. If you can just get focused now, and especially if the enemy team decides to go something like a Desolator, you just get destroyed so quickly. I think you have to have some sort of defensive capability, and that's why I think the mech is super prevalent. I mean, if you remember correctly, Jay, when we first saw Alchemists come into the professional scene, it was about putting him middle and seeing what he was able to get there. And so to see him return to this middle lane and prioritize an item that not only helps his team but then gives him survivability in the early game, it's a really good fit to deal with the change to his ultimate.
No, absolutely. It definitely is kind of right, making it it just makes sense. It just purely makes sense for both the meta and for the hero and how he's been changed. And I love to see the adaptation. I personally thought it was a huge nerf to him. I remember saying that. I saw that and I thought, well, this he might not get picked now. He was so tanky before because he just gained so much health. It was ridiculous. And now it's only health regen, so it'll get bursted. Well, he's not going to get bursted as much because he's got a mech, so he'll just bring that health right back up, and the health regen is quite substantial. I mean, if you don't get bursted, he's going to live because it's just so much to get through at the end of the day. So yeah, I was a big fan of it as well. I've seen, this is the second game now where I've seen the Sage get picked up early, and I thought it was going to be Heaven's Halberd looking against what they were up against, and yet both times it ended up being an S and Y on this hero, and I'm not disappointed with the item on him. I just felt like, was that the best option? And definitely in this game, I liked it for sure. But I'm not sure every game I would prefer it over the Heaven's Halberd when you get that Sage.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think it's like a great general purpose item. But obviously, like you're saying, if there is that niche where you really need to, have that disarm, then yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's like the ultimate going to make you durable, and especially depending upon what heroes you're against. If they're heroes that don't want to build MKB, then you're set. You don't really even have to worry about them hard countering your item. But I think the thing too, in going back to how defensive Vici Gaming had to play this game was, if you go an item like Desolator, you're able to stack up minus armor against Alchemist, then you can sort of deal with that health regeneration. But if you have to build defensive, that just plays his strength, and because he has that long-term longevity in team fights that, unless you're able to bring him down really quickly, you're not going to deal with it. And, he can just build BKB if you decide to try and do it with magic items. So it almost has to be, a Desolator, an MKB, really high physical damage output items to really bring him down.
Right. I definitely was a fan. Can I also say, we've seen so much Pugna play coming out here, and the fact is, the first two games he was banned out, but the third game, not banned or picked. So, now granted, Pugna is generally picked for a strong pushing team. I mean, he doesn't have to be, but let's be honest, that's what he excels at. Just team fight and early pushing. But it just was curious to me that he wasn't even looked at in this third game. Do you think they just were so sure of their strategies that he was just overlooked at this point?
No, I don't know. I mean, this almost, I think, just for me, adds to why I don't want to see any dramatic rebalancing yet, because, like you were saying, this is a hero that's been super prevalent, but it's okay to skip over him. I mean, before, this patch or the last patch, when's the last time, like,
oh, right,
skipping over Naix? Like, what are you doing? Like, that doesn't happen. That's wasted. Like, you could probably count on one hand how many times Naix gets skipped over, Lifestealer gets skipped over in the previous patches. But But now it almost feels like, because we have seen, like you were saying, the games where Pugna goes late game. Okay, he has Oghanims, he can Life Drain, he can try and Drain Tank, but is that, enough to make him a viable pick? Maybe not. Maybe we go for something else this game. And it's almost like the Alchemist, not obviously in this game, but in some of the other games where he's able to get that mech up. Like, he's able to sort of do enough, I feel like, in just his ability to gank, to acid spray down creeps if he wants to try and push. That it's almost like, unless you're really going for the hardcore lineup, you could just go the Alchemist and have a more stable late game hero.
Very true. There is 2 heroes though banned all 3 times in this matchup.
Oh,
the one I think you can guess 100%. Shouldn't be hard. Shouldn't be a challenge.
Oh, it shouldn't be. But
really shouldn't be.
I feel like you're putting me on the spot and it's making it a challenge. Ooh.
I really hope you can guess one of the 2.
Batrider? Does he? I know.
Wrong.
Really? Batrider gets skipped.
He got banned once the whole series.
I've never seen the ban.
And he got banned last ban of that ban, so no, not Batrider. Batrider, come on. Batrider got nerfed so bad, people don't even want to look at him right now. He went in the corner. Come on, you could get one. Do I have to give you a hint?
Yeah.
'Cause this is embarrassing.
It is embarrassing.
He's a support. Oh dear, this is your field of expertise. I can't even look at you right now.
Oh, I can't look at me either, but that's also just because
It starts with
that's
the
tough.
V.
No, man, sir.
Visage gets
Oh, God.
banned. All 3. You deserve a timeout, big
Yeah.
time for this one, because
Listen,
he's been in the scene for how many months now? Anyways, the second one I would give you a break on. That would be Clockwork. These were the first 2 top 2 bans in all 3 games. So no Clockwork or Visage, but Visage makes perfect sense. He's gotten nerfed. He's still going to be around. It's just such a strong hero. The Clockwork, though, probably has a lot to do with the playstyle that's made it, that we were kind of getting into about how action-packed early it is. Clockwork, just when he hits 6, is one of the most threatening people you can imagine, because he's going to jump from across a river and initiate on your whole team. But why couldn't you think of Visage?
in my defense, it's because hero with V in the name. I'm 49 games deep in my 100 games of Venomancer, and so the brain is kind of stuck on that one.
I suppose. No, I'm
That's
still not
bias.
giving you any excuses, but yeah, okay.
That's true. I didn't miss him either. That's fine. When we were talking about the Earthshaker earlier, that's actually the one space where I actually like Earthshaker quite a bit. If you compare him up with the Visage, because he can just charge the Soul Assumption so easily. And there have even been tri-lanes based around Visages with Shakers in them because of that nice little combination. So, that's the one place I think where I actually like Earthshaker. If you're able to get that combination. But yeah, the Clockwork, I feel like, has just been a great hero. I mean, throughout the patches, buffs, nerfs, whatever, he's been really stable for a long time. He doesn't show up in every game, but he's always been meta prevalent. And I mean, to me, that almost is a sign of just like a well-balanced hero, even though they do small stuff to him left here and there. They still mess with him a tiny bit. But he's just always a great initiating hero, especially sort of the advent of Force Staff Clockwork. I feel like has been like just really neat to see, and an interesting answer to the problem of, oh crap, well, what if I'm an underfarmed Clockwork? I'm just going to lock myself in with someone that's going to murder me. I'm sort of not like crazy surprised that he spanned out, but like you said, no, I guess. Well, I wouldn't have even guessed Visage apparently, so maybe would not have guessed that to be a hero that gets banned out. But I guess, going back real quick to just the Pugna thing, a hero that's picked up in both of the final games of the NESC tournament. So, like you were saying, super prevalent, super meta prevalent, but just doesn't make an appearance in this last game and banned out in the first 2.
Yep. Pugna, I'm a big fan of him, have been forever. And, the fact that his Nether Blast, put him and a Leshrac on a team, it's going to be some quick towers in a good fashion. But, Yeah, I guess, these teams rather would have these other stronger heroes to carry these early items. Like I said, it came down to them for them either Alchemist or Pugna probably for middle, and they just rather have the Alchemist. He's just proving to be such a strong force. Why would you not when he's been successful? He went 3-0 this series, and I mean I'm not saying like that means he's 100% win rate for the whole world, but I'm just saying that he's clearly doing something right with the build and the position and the way he's getting items, and it's definitely working for these teams, at least in the Southeast Asian region. So I'm curious to see. I definitely need to watch more Western games and just see if any of this kind of stuff's getting adopted. I definitely saw the Viper mech thing in a Western game, so I know that there is the crossover, but I'm not sure to what degree it is yet. So it's definitely something to be on the lookout for to see if this kind of carries over as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that about wraps it up, unless you have any other points you wanted to make.
I just also wanted to say, unrelated to the games, everyone give a salute to Dignitas. They are no longer hosting a Dota 2 team. It has been disbanded, and they are reevaluating their options for future Dota options, which probably means they're going to stick to LoL. But there was some drama. There was some drama involving Korok and practicing and yada 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 yada. But
it wasn't baby mama drama, and we all know that is the worst kind of drama.
Oh, no one wants a baby mama drama.
It could have been worse. Just remember.
But that's all I really wanted to just throw it out there. So give a salute to our North American Canadian brothers. They are no longer with us in Dota.
In Dota, there's the soul.
They're probably breathing. Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. It was another fantabulous, amazing episode of the Dota on Demand podcast. You can catch us on Stitcher, on the YouTube, on the Facebook, all of these things. Pretty obviously, Dota on Demand. And yeah, enjoy your Dire Tide whenever it comes out. Since you all
please enjoy it. God.
Play it. I want to have 30-minute queues for regular games because everyone's playing Dire Tide for all of the hoopla. But yeah, enjoy, guys. Look forward to the next patch, and of course, look forward to the next episode of Dota on Demand. We will see you next week.